and welcome. It's 6 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Victoria Lenhart. I'm an associate at GLCYD, and we are very excited to partner with the wonderful presenters to bring tonight's training. I'll be hosting tonight and introducing the speakers, but before we get rolling, I have a few housekeeping things I wanted to go over. First of all, there's note paper by the door in case you forgot your notebook or anything like that. We do have sheets of paper that you can take notes on, so feel free to grab one. You'll also see index cards on the back table. At the end, we'll be doing a question and answer panel. And since we were expecting a pretty big crowd and got it, to make things go a little smoother, we'll have you write your questions on the note cards and we will be collecting them and then kind of facilitating the question and answer. So if you haven't grabbed index cards yet, feel free to go ahead and grab them. We'll be passing them out before the Q&A period as well. If you do have a quick clarifying question during the presentation, you are welcome to ask it to the presenter. Just raise your hand. But if you have a more longer question and you want all of the panelists to provide feedback on it, please save it for the cards. And we do have Facebook Live streaming today, so if you want to share this training with someone afterwards, you will be able to get the link to the video on our Facebook page, and I'll be posting it on the GLCYD website later. So we want to welcome all of our friends streaming on the internet. Tonight's presentation will feature three presenters: Jim LaJoie, Executive Director of the Superior Health Foundation, Carole Pence, President of Pence Consulting, and Heather Steltenpohl. Did I get it? Yes! Development Director here at Peter White Public Library. These three are phenomenal fundraisers, and I know you guys are going to learn a lot of really great information tonight. First up, I'd like to welcome Jim LaJoie. Jim is the Executive Director of the Superior Health Foundation in Marquette. The Superior Health Foundation provides health-centered grant funding to nonprofit organizations all across the Upper Peninsula. Jim is actively engaged in all subcommittees of the Board of Directors, including the Governance and Nominating Committee. Jim has spent the last dozen years working in nonprofit fundraising and has served on a number of boards. As a Negaunee native, he earned a bachelor's degree in communications and master's degree in healthcare administration from Northern Michigan University. Away from work, Jim enjoys vacationing in the warmth, spending time at his family camp, reading, writing, and being with his family. Welcome, Jim.
There I am. Thanks, Victoria. Thanks to all of you for coming out today. We're gonna, when we started getting this and putting this together with Carole and Heather, we know that there's a lot of needs, and there's a lot of things that we can all learn from one another, because this isn't really rocket science. It's a lot of peer-to-peer learning and how you develop boards, how you fundraise. And as I look out in the audience, I see a lot of familiar people, and a lot of familiar people are in the same boat, working on board development, working on fundraising. So we want to keep this simple, keep it interactive, and really teach the basics, some of the things that we've learned over the years in fundraising. All right, I'm going to talk about 6 things that I have found in my career to be essential in board development. And the first part is, I think it's very, very important to recruit passion and not titles. And what I mean by that is, I think we get so caught up when we're developing our board where we say, we really need to have an accountant. We have to have an attorney. You have to have a business owner. We need to have all these different things, and we go through this matrix, and it's good to have all those folks. But at the end of the day, the kinds of people that you want are people that believe strongly in your mission, okay? They want to be they actively communicate that they want to be part of carrying out your mission. And those two things are absolutely essential, because when you're recruiting board members, oftentimes board members, you look at them and you wonder, what is their main focus for wanting to be on the board? Is it to be on one particular committee? Is it to add to the resume? You don't want to be adding people that want to be on to add to the resume. You want people who really belong, who believe in your mission and the focus of what you're doing. So I find that is one of the most important things. Next is clearly define roles and responsibilities so there are no surprises. When you're recruiting board members, directors, it's important to have that conversation about what you expect from board directors. And there's a number of different things that fall into that category. What is expected in an honest, open forum. I can't tell you over the years how many times I've talked with other executive directors or other boards where they've talked about a director not performing the capabilities or not living up to the expectations or not supporting the organization philanthropically, blowing off meetings, not being part of it. And then I asked the question, well, was that all laid out beforehand? No. We just thought they knew that, or she knew that. No, it doesn't work that way. You need to be open and honest and have that dialogue and talk about what are the meeting times, how often do you meet? Do you meet monthly? Do you meet every other month? Do you meet quarterly? You need to talk about the committee structure, how the committee structure works, whether there's, the chair of the committee, how the committee chair convenes the meetings, puts those together, and how all that works so you can bring all that committee work back to the full board. Fiduciary responsibilities, huge role for boards. And I think we've experienced that a little bit in this community, but it's happened in a number of other communities across the country. It never ceases to amaze me when I pick up my tried and true Chronicle of Philanthropy, which I read religiously every month. There's always at least 2-3 stories in there about boards and organizations that have fallen apart because of the fiduciary responsibility was left unchecked. And that simply cannot happen. You have to have a board who's willing to govern, a board that's willing to talk and be on top of that type of thing. Expectations to enhance and support. You want expectations for your board members. And every board member, there's different expectations. Some board members are good at fundraising. Some board members are good at opening doors for you to get in the door for fundraising. Some are really good at policy, making policies and governing, that part of it. Some are really good in the event planning. They love to plan events. They like to be part of that, get prizes, get sponsorships. So when you're recruiting board members and you're going through that vetting process, find out what the strengths and weaknesses are of them, and don't expect them to do something that they're not comfortable with. I often hear that from nonprofit leaders. We'll be discussing particular things and they'll say, so-and-so just doesn't fundraise, doesn't help us with fundraising. I said, well, maybe so-and-so is not comfortable in that role. Have you tried a different role? And that's all part of that communication that we talked about. And then seeking the input on how they would be an ideal fit for your organization. Perfect example of this was about 3 weeks ago. We were recruiting a board member, potential board director from the West End over in the Ontonagon area. Drove over, had lunch, we were discussing all the roles and responsibilities and the things that needed to be done. And we talked about, we asked input. How do you see yourself being an effective board member with the Superior Health Foundation? Well, I like events. I know you have a gala. Can I be involved in that? Yep. Pretty good with finance. I've done a number of budgets, and I've worked in the school setting, I've worked in this setting, and I'm pretty good with that. How about finance? I said, absolutely. You'd be a great addition to our finance committee. But I'm really not good at fundraising. I don't like picking up the phone and calling. I said, it's okay. But in the 2 other areas that she was comfortable with, that was good enough for us because we knew that she could be an asset to our organization. Okay? Got to ask the candidate, why do you want to serve on our board? It's amazing that that question's not asked. Most of the discussion is, know, you're successful, you're well known in the community, people know you, people will relate to you, you'd be a good addition to our board. In some cases that works. In other cases, they don't really know what their expectations are, what the roles and responsibilities are, and what that does is that puts an undue stress on the rest of the organization. Okay? Develop a process for recruiting board directors and stick to the process. This one is, I could probably put this number 1. I put it, I think, number 3, but I find it's amazing. Not in many nonprofit worlds, they don't have a process for vetting a board directors. We have, and this is not part of the presentation, but we have policies and procedures that we have in place with Superior Health Foundation about how exactly that whole process works. Because you don't want any confusion in the process. And the other important part of this is, I firmly believe in this, and this is a point of debate, and some people may disagree with this, but I don't believe in any situation executive director should lead a process to find a board member. I believe they should be part of the discussion. And why should they be part of the discussion? Because if you have a governance and nominating committee that's actively recruiting a board member, and that board member used to be a neighbor of yours that ran over your foot 3 or 4 times, or you had some problems with that person, would you like that person on your board? No. So you need to be part of that discussion. But the governance and nominating committee, or the nominating committee that you have, has to be chairing that and leads the discussion on vetting potential board directors and go through the process. And you know, the whole idea is to bring on board members, not personal friends. That's very, very important. And maintaining the culture is always imperative. We talk about this thing called culture, and it's real. When you have a culture of philanthropy in your organization, it starts with your board. And it's top down. If your board is on board with it, that will have a top-down effect on your whole organization. Conduct due diligence, and by that, your organization, your nominating committee, or maybe it's the chair of your board, should ask board candidates 4 key questions. These are 4 that we use a lot. Can you fulfill your board's fiduciary and legal oversight responsibilities? How have you already demonstrated a passion for organization like ours? One of the things that I'll ask board members, or our committee will ask board members, is if in our situation we're a health-centered organization. If we're recruiting a board director that's been involved in another health-centered organization, we'll ask, how were you involved? How did you help that organization? How did you help them achieve their goals? That's an important part. Do you fundamentally have the time to serve on our board? This one's amazing. It's really amazing. Just within the last, I think, 3 weeks, I've had 3 different conversations with nonprofit leaders about this very topic. And the executive director said, you know, we have our annual meeting, we set our board times, we go over all that. Can you make it? We hear nothing. Then we have the board meeting, and there's 5, 6, 7 people that don't show up. How can you conduct a successful meeting if you don't have good representation on your board? That is really, really important. And are you able to meet the board's fundraising requirement? If you have one. And I find that fascinating too, because I think there's a lot of boards that don't have that. You know, some boards have a fundraising requirement where you're required to give a certain amount annual gift per year. Some just want 100% participation. That's how our board works. Whether you give $25, $250, $2,500, we want 100% participation. And why is that important? Because when your organization is going out and fundraising, how can you successfully fundraise if they ask the question, is your board supporting your efforts? So if you don't have 100% participation, you need to get there. And if you're uncomfortable with that conversation, go to your board chair and have your board chair do it. We've had to do that a few times. Right, Dan? Former board chair Dan Arnold is here tonight. Thanks for being here. All right, next one. Ensure cultural fit. Identify candidates whose goal is to advance the mission rather than their own personal resume game. What do you look for in good candidates? There's a lot of things that you're looking for, but I've identified 5 things that we look for that are always top of mind, top of list. You want people who are good listeners, which is a dying skill, isn't it? It really is. You want people who ask probing, thoughtful questions. People who are well-respected and engaged thinkers. You want that at board meetings. You want them to ask questions. You want them to be part of the process. People who clearly understand their role as not the CEOs. That's a big one. I tell you, I see a bunch of nonprofit leaders kind of giggling out there right now, but that's a big problem. It is. Sometimes you have people on your board who think that they're the executive director, and the roles and responsibilities need to be clearly defined. People who are happy to be ambassadors of your organization and tout its good work. I call ambassadors cheerleaders, whether you're a male or female. I want cheerleaders to represent our organization, and the nonprofit boards that I've sat on, and I've sat on a number over the years, I like cheerleaders, because those are the people that get people excited about what you're doing, and when they're excited, you're going to bring more money in. Finally, guard against conflict of interest and have a document in place. Your organization's reputation and standing in the community are only as good as your transparency in conducting your operation. Perceptions matter if you want to raise money. Be certain there are no glaring conflicts of interest in joining the board and discuss potential conflicts and best practices. You need to have a conflict of interest policy in place. That board director needs to sign that, and you need to review that each year at your annual meeting. It's surprising how many boards do not have conflict of interest policies in place. Very, very important to have that. And be sure you have a confidentiality policy in place, that when you discuss sensitive topics and you're discussing things at board meetings, that's where they stay at board meetings. I remember one time I was on a nonprofit board about 10 years ago, and we were discussing sensitive topics having to do with things going on in the organization, and I went out in the community and I was at a restaurant a few days later, and I overheard a fellow board member telling everybody about what happened at the board meeting. When I got done with my dinner, I politely went over to that person. I said, "Can I talk to you for a second?" And we had a nice conversation. There was no yelling or screaming or anything, but I said, you're in violation. You can't be doing that. You can't be doing that. And strong board leadership is essential in the process. When you have a strong board leadership from the top down, you're not going to have those types of problems. Okay? Anybody have any quick questions? And then we'll move on to the next presenter, and again, we'll answer a bunch at the end as well. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jim. That was awesome. Lots of really great points to consider when selecting board members. I know it's a really great refresher and things that we should always keep in mind when it comes that time of year. Next up, we have Carole Pence, who's going to speak about getting your board involved in the annual fund campaign. Carole is president of Pence Consulting, a privately held consulting firm based here in Marquette, Michigan. Since 1992, Carole has conducted trainings and facilitated meetings with hundreds of individuals throughout the United States. Carole is known for finding practical solutions for raising money and is recognized as a philanthropic specialist. Services offered through Pence Consulting include annual fund development, campaign fundraising for endowments and capital campaigns, board training and development, and feasibility studies. Her concentrated trainings focus on how personality and effective communication skills produce extraordinary results. In addition to her work with her firm, she is on the faculty at Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. Through her extensive involvement with the Lilly School of Philanthropy, She has had the privilege of teaching for organizations like Thurgood Marshall College Fund, San Diego Foundation, and the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. Welcome, Carole.
Well, it's not like Project Runway. You can't run behind there and go, yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming, and I have had a vision for the last 3 years of wanting to do this free for board members, because so much of what I see in organizational fundraising is this terrible fear of raising money when you're on a nonprofit organization and their board. So I'm glad to see so many of you have come tonight. Hank Russell was the founder of the Fundraising School, and he says, fundraising is the gentle art of teaching the joy of giving. And I never had the privilege of meeting Hank, but Hank is my mentor. He is, his concepts are what I've internalized since I teach so much for them. I don't know how to think outside of the fundraising school and the concepts that they have. But fundraising really is the gentle art of teaching the joy of giving. The other piece that we look at fundraising is it's the right person asking the right prospect for the right gift, for the right program at the right time, in the right way. And that's just another one of those tried and true that you hear all the time. And so you say, why do I have to help with fundraising if I'm on a board of directors? Well, if I'm a person and I'm doing fundraising, I have this many relationships. Every board member has this many, and pretty soon there's this huge group of people that you are able to tap into for your resources, and you're the right person to ask them because you have those relationships. And so I think it's really important for us to understand the reason we want a team and we want a team approach is that relationship, because that's what fundraising is all about. Now, the interesting thing that I find listening to Jim's presentation is not everybody's good at fundraising, and I think that's true, but everybody can be taught how to do this. And so that's where the training comes in. I worked with an organization in Battle Creek. Nope, this one was in Flint. It was Big Brothers, Big Sisters. We developed a case statement, we developed a plan, we put information together. I did a board training, and a woman said, I've sat on board for the Girl Scouts for 25 years. This is the first time I feel like I know what I'm doing. We've never had training, because we assume everybody knows how to do this. And we do. We know how to have conversations with people, but we're not comfortable. It's like the worst thing in the world when someone says, you need to go out and help us raise money. And people just want to crawl under the table. And we don't have to be that way. We can train people, we can teach people, we can help people to understand. It's a conversational process. And if you think about it in this order, and you have material that you can use as a script, it's really not that difficult. The next slide talks about where money comes from. Every year, Giving USA, which is also part of the Center on Philanthropy, does research, and they look at where do the money come from, how much money is given away, and they're always a year behind. So in 2015, they looked at 2014 contributions. $358.38 billion was given away in charity. 72% of that money came from individuals. Another 8% came from bequests. So that means 80% of all money comes from individuals. So when you're looking at where is the money, where are you going to find money for your organization, 80% of that money comes from individuals. 5% comes from corporations. Corporate giving has stayed between 4.8 and 5.2% for the last 25 years that I've been doing this. Because they give out of their profits, and they also give out of the profits to areas that connect with the kind of business that they do. Foundations is growing, that's 15%, and it's growing because many people are setting up individual funds that they're giving monies out of. Community foundations are a good example of that. they've grown the way individuals can feel more philanthropic and be able to give that money away. So that's another thing to look at. The next one, and you have handouts on that and they're available there, but it shows you a pie of where the most money comes from. 32% of that is religion. And religious giving is dropping. That used to be about 10% higher. But the lack of church attendance and the change in religion has really dropped where that money comes from. Now there are some places, and if you work in the Black community, for example, a lot of the money is being funneled through churches, and then through the church they're giving to different areas. So you still see a lot of that in a lot of different types of organizations. Education is another high one, 15%. Human services, 12%. Environment and animals, 3%. So as you go through that, you can look at where does your organization fall, and you can see that of that pie, what percentage is coming from those different areas. Now, where are our donors? And that's what everybody says, where are our donors? Well, they are board members. And yes, board members are nowadays being asked when they join a board to make a contribution. And some organizations actually have a very specific amount of money. And as Victoria said, you can download these slides from the Great Lakes Center for Youth Development website. They come from our inner circle. We all have an inner circle. We all have a group of people who are committed to the mission, who are connected to the organization, and who are really part of those we call on all the time. Major donors, those are for every organization going to be different. Major donors are those people who give a major gift to your organization. Now, how much is that? It depends on your organization. When I do training on this, what I find for people, sometimes it's $500, sometimes it's $1,000, sometimes it's $5,000 or $10,000. So it really depends on the organization as to what that is. For membership organizations, that's another place where you look for members. People often say, well, they pay dues. The Humane Society is an example of that. They're a dues-paying organization, but they also, through that dues-paying organization, have donors who give to them because they love the Humane Society. I have been doing this for 25 years. I mean, this is 25 years of being in business. I can hardly believe it. But when I first started the business, I ran a telemarketing program, and I ran an annual fund campaign, probably for everyone in town. And my callers used to say, Carol, we called them last week and they didn't recognize their voice. And I always had to chuckle because one of our most successful first campaigns was for the Marquette Humane Society. And they had raised about $6,000 from a mail campaign. We added a telemarketing 2.5 weeks, I think, campaign, called people, and they raised an additional $25,000. Same market, different approach. And what we heard was people love their animals. They love the fact that their animals aren't at the Humane Society. They feel bad because animals are at the... People love their animals more than they love people. And so that's why we find the Humane Society has a great appeal, and maybe it is for smaller donations in the beginning, but it has an appeal because people have a soft spot in their heart for animals. So in membership organizations, we segment people. We have certain people who we sift through the membership and we say this pot of people, this pool, are people who maybe would be able to give us bigger gifts. And how do we find that out? They've been active in our cause, they volunteer, they're engaged, they're involved in a variety of activities that we have. They've also given, possibly to other organizations at a significantly higher level. Do we do that? Yes, we do. You have a list of members. If I'm raising money and another organization has an event, I collect that list. I've been known to go to other organizations, take pictures of plaques of names, and then look, do we have the same people? How come they're giving $25,000 over here and they're giving 10 here to us? So, you know, there are potentially people who can give you more money, and you have to look for them. It's called prospect research. And then all members, of course, of an organization potentially can make a contribution. There's some organizations that are volunteer-driven. They're totally volunteer. They have no staff. They are really looking only at the people who volunteer to help with their services. Those organizations find their donors from long-term volunteers, along with the whole segment of volunteers that they have within the organization. Organizationally, if you have a nonprofit organization, your inner circle is often your management staff. They should be giving. All employees and the community, and that means that community that's part of your organization. People who give, members of the community. This is a big group. There's a book called 7 Faces of Philanthropy, and they segment people by these different stages. Now, it's a copyrighted book. It would cost $95 to actually use their wording, so I'm using my wording for their wording, because I didn't want to pay $95. But I also didn't want to copyright, use copyrighted material. But it is called the 7 Faces of Philanthropy. If you Google 7 Faces of Philanthropy, there's tons of papers out there. But what they talk about is the biggest segment of people who are donors are communitarians. They're people from the community. They're people who actually are very engaged, involved in community. Now, when you think of community, who do you think of? I see one person, and I won't embarrass you because you come to all my trainings, and I know you're involved in all kinds of volunteer activities. But, so members of community, one person that comes to mind, Michelle Butler, in our community is engaged, involved in the community. She would be community-oriented. People who believe God is asking them to do His will, and to be able to give. They're very religious givers, and they're donors who give because they believe in God and they believe it's their job to give back to society. Giving was taught to them by their parents. I did focus group maybe 5 years ago with Hannah Monjette, and we brought a bunch of women together to see women in philanthropy, to see what we could get going in our community. And it was people 50 and over and 50 and under. And it was interesting because people who are 50 and over tended to learn to give based on their family. It was their families gave, it was very church-oriented. It was very much that we were taught to give by our family. The younger group was not so much family-oriented as it was with the older generation, but it was interesting to see how people genuinely learn to give based on family giving. And I have a document that I use with a training called Philanthropic Autobiography. And it's kind of interesting to go through how you think about giving and how you became a giver and what was it that motivated you. There are people who give because of tax reasons, and that's very much an incentive for a lot of people. And that's why when you look at giving, the biggest time and biggest push for you should be the last 2 weeks of December. When I ran my telemarketing program, we raised the highest percentage of gifts between the 15th of December and the 20th. That's when you all take vacation. That's when your office isn't open. That's when people are thinking about giving. That's when people, when they have resources, are saying to their accountant, how much money do I have left to give? And we need to think about that. There are people who give for social reasons. I have a friend, a few, women who I'm friends with who I consider socialites. And you know who they are, because when you see them, they're like, oh my God, hug, hug, kiss, kiss. You know, I'm like, great, you know. But they love being involved. They love going to events. And 20 years ago, university fundraising was very fundraising oriented, event fundraising oriented, because socialites ran development offices. And that has really changed. In university fundraising today, it's more people who are very dominant and fiscally oriented. And on the DISC developmental chart, it is a U. And what that U tells me is I'm very dominant, I'm very fiscally responsible. It also tells me relationships are not that important. So we have to really think about when we're hiring people, this is a relationship business. And if we're really only focused on fiscal responsibility, we're going to lose some of that within our organization. The other people they're selfless, they care about good causes, they really want to help. And so they give because they really believe that there's a reason for them to give, and they're selfless givers. And the other one are people who've been helped by a cause. I always think of a group in Battle Creek Charitable Union that I worked with. And they had a person who was living under the bridge. Charitable Union gives away free clothing to people in need. And he came there, got clothing. They helped him interview for a job by getting us something to wear. He eventually got a job, eventually met someone, he eventually got married, and he gives back to that organization because he could not have survived had they not been there for him. And I think many of you can think of many times when you were helped by someone and you never forget that, and you really want to give back because of that. So when we were doing this, we were talking about how should we talk about giving, and so I started thinking, because major gifts is really my forte, that's what I really like to talk about, but we thought it's probably important if you're sitting on a board. The campaign you have to run every year is called the Annual Fund Campaign. And the Annual Fund Campaign helps you with operating support for your organization. It helps to, it kind of bridges the gap between what you have and what you don't have. And a simple way that I used to teach people was, for sure I have this much money. I am pretty sure I have this much. And that kind of equals about 2/3. There's a third money I don't have. So I may have to raise $100,000 for the annual campaign, but I really don't have to raise that much because I know I'm going to get this much, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to get this, so I probably have to raise $30,000 of that $100,000. Now my goal is still $100,000, but I'm really focused on that $30,000 that I don't have. For an annual campaign, your dollars come from past supporters, present donors, and new donors. In the fundraising school, we used to call, but they took this word off, but I still like it. I suspect you might be interested in giving to me. And those suspects aren't prospects yet, but I think maybe I have this pool of people who might give. And then I talk about prospects. I have people who really, they've attended an event, they've come to something, they're friends of so-and-so, they've had some interest, so they become prospects to my campaign. So I'm looking for people who are going to help with operating support, first of all, and that's really what an annual fund campaign does. So you have to know, and I just want to re-emphasize this, the annual fund is understood that it's there to help with operating support. So we don't have to say, we're raising money for operating support. We're running an annual fund campaign to raise this amount of money for our organization, which is going to fund these different types of programs. So it's essential for an organization to know how much money they're going to be short every year in their budget. Money comes from individuals, comes from businesses, corporations, foundations. it comes from a variety of sources. And so what we do is we look at this as a pot, like a circle, and we say certain percent is going to come from individuals, certain percent from donors, who are companies, corporations. In our community, it's more small businesses, professional organizations, service clubs. So we look at the whole pool and we put it out by percentages, and then it's not that huge. It's not like 100% of that $100,000 has to come from individuals. It comes from a variety of different sources. 60% of that money comes through personal solicitation, and this is what we would consider major gift fundraising. So in a $100,000 campaign, we create what's called a gift range chart, and you can Google the word gift range chart. You put in your goal, and it tells you exactly how many people need to give at each level in order for you to be successful. And so those people are personally solicited. Those are the people I need to train you on how to give if I'm the person who is helping with that campaign. 40% come from special events. They come from mailings. They come from people walking in the door. I'm going to give you a gift. When I was at the Y, we ran a campaign for a week called Spin for a Cause. We raised $10,000 from new people walking in. Every hour, somebody was on a bike, spinning for a cause, saying, help me get off this bike. So I even called my kids because I said, I can't ride this bike for an hour. So the annual fund is often spearheaded by staff. It does use volunteers. It does use a chairperson and a campaign committee, and that's kind of what you're looking for in the annual fund campaign. This is something for you to think about when you're looking at major gifts. It's called linkability interest. I have to look at every person, and that's why this is a thinking process. There was one time I bid on a job for someone in the Detroit area, and I didn't get it because I said, fundraising is about thinking. And they said, no, it's not, it's about doing. You cannot do this without thinking. You have to think about every single person that you've identified you want to personally solicit it. Do they have a link to the organization? Do they have ability to give and interest? Fundraising is about raising money. It's about asking people to give. That's all it is. I mean, there's no big secret. You know, you can go through all the formulas, you can do all of this, but somebody has to ask these people to give. But they also have to have a link to your organization. They have to have ability, and they have to be interested. If they're not a solicitation. They're a cultivation. They're somebody that I need to cultivate, tell them what we're doing, see if there's a way that I can engage them in giving. But I'm not going to solicit you for money if you don't care. I'm wasting my time because there's a lot of people out there. And so it's really, really important that we understand that. So with prospects, they have linkability interest. Past donors have linkability interest. And repeat donors, here's a group of people in the annual campaign where if you gave $100 to me this year and you gave $100 to me the year before and maybe the year before that, what I'm trying to do now is upgrade you. So I keep you at that level for 2 years, maybe 3 years, but at least after the 3rd year, I'm asking you for more money. So I'm gradually building my base of support, and I'm asking you to move up and give additional money to our campaign. It's called upgrade. Now, if I've kept you for 3 years, the likelihood that you're going to do that is very high because I've done something to make you want to stay connected. So what are the key roles and responsibilities in fundraising? The CEO or executive director, they're the key spokesperson for that campaign along with whoever decides that they're going to be the chair. They have to be comfortable and understand fundraising. You have to recruit people who are going to volunteer and help at least 3 months ahead of time. You have to create a case statement. You have to train people. You really have to develop a plan for how you're going to go about and do this. And you don't want to say, tomorrow we're raising money. You really want to have a plan in place, and you want to have time to work with people so that you can identify who the prospects are for this particular campaign. A marketing campaign is usually developed, when are we going to go and do press releases? When are we going to tell people how much we've raised? When are we really going to excite people about our goal? And we want to go public when we've raised 60% of our money. Nobody cares that you're running a dinner today to kick off a campaign to raise $100,000. They're very excited when you go to them and say, we have already raised $70,000 and we only need 30 more. And we need you to help. And then I can do that because I see the potential for you to be successful. In the fundraising school, we always talk about putting deck chairs around the Titanic. No one really wants to do that. But that's how a lot of people see fundraising. It's like, oh yes, let me get like the top level deck chair. A case statement is important. A lot of organizations don't have that. They don't understand what that is. It's a packet of material. It's at least an extensive brochure that says, this is what we're raising money for. Here's what the money is going to do for the organization. And I can hand it to you and you can read it and you know exactly what we're trying to do. Sometimes that is the longest piece. It's taken 6 weeks sometimes to write that, to get people in agreement on what it is we want that to look like, what are the pictures we want in there. You'd be surprised how difficult that sometimes is. But that's key, very key to raising money, is to having a case statement. Key leadership need to commit to the campaign, and this is where you need management staff need to give. When I went to the university, I was hired in 1989 as an administrator in the development office, and I was put in charge of the President's Club, which was a $5,000 commitment, $1,000 a year over 5. That was expected that I would be a member of the President's Club. And so even if you're paid staff and you're going out to solicit money, you need to be a member at whatever level it is that you're going to be soliciting money. The other thing is you can't ask people to give money if you've never given. So when I was at the university, there was a member of the Board of Control, and she said, there's a psychological study that's been done, and that study says if you go to solicit someone for money and you've never given, you're sitting across from that person, and when you go to ask, you're going to blink. That blink's going to send a subliminal message to that person not to give. And I'm going to tell you, when I sit down and talk to you, I'm not going to blink. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's true. I can't ask somebody to do something I haven't done. And so that's why giving is so imperative if you're going to be asking for money. Some of the reasons that it doesn't work, and these are things that I've seen over the years: high cost, low return. People spend way too much money running their campaign, and the return on investment isn't there. You can very easily figure out the cost to raise $1. There's a certain, that's why math comes into play. You figure out how much it costs, how much you've raised, what has it really benefited the organization. When I do this with special event fundraising, what I have found with many organizations is they lose money, because there's staff time involved in special events as well. And so when you really figure out what did it cost time-wise, staff-wise, facility-wise, many organizations came up with they did not raise a dime. They actually lost money. And so that's why it's important. Other pitfalls, inadequate planning. People don't plan. They just say, here's what they do in organizations. You are in charge of annual fund. Go figure it out. And that person doesn't want to say, well, I don't really know how. But seriously, you can't do that to people. But that I've seen this happen with nonprofit organizations, executive directors. They're busy. They don't have time. They make an assignment. And when you say, how come you only raised that much money last year? What the person will say to you is, I've never been trained. Sometimes you have unrealistic goals. You have an executive who wants to raise $1 million and convinces the board you can go out and raise $1 million. And it's not realistic. You just don't have the prospective donors to successfully raise $1 million. This is a real key, lack of follow-up. Have you ever received a letter in the mail saying, would you give money to my organization? I will call you and follow up on this piece. Anybody ever had that happen? Anybody have that no call? I have. I've had that happen 3 or 4 times, and I finally ran into someone and I said, you know, a few months ago I got a packet of information from you. It was a really nice packet. And in that packet, you said you were going to call. She said, well, I thought you'd just give. I don't do that. If you say you are going to call, I am not going to respond to that package because I'm stubborn and I'm also a fundraiser. So I wait for you to call. She's like, well, you're a professional fundraiser. I was afraid. Seriously? Then why did you send the letter? Because she thought I would just, because of her name, respond to that. And so follow-up is the key. If you say you're going to follow up in 2 weeks, follow up in 2 weeks. Failure to acknowledge gifts. Nowadays, everybody sends out thank you letters, right? Everybody should be sending out thank you letters within 48 hours. That's the key. The other thing, if a person is putting it online and giving you a contribution on their credit card, guess what? That contribution is showing up instantly, and your letter isn't. And people begin to wonder, how come I haven't heard back from the organization? So that's very critical. Ineffective communication with donors. If I've given to an organization, there's a problem in the organization, I've heard about it in the newspaper, in Marquette, you've heard about it on word on the street, wherever else, and I'm a donor, and I don't know what happened. That makes me uncomfortable, because I should be the first person who knows what's going on with that organization, especially if I'm a significant donor. Unresponsive board, that means the board is not acknowledging people when they see them. That means the board is not engaged in this process. I don't know how many times I've been out when I've worked on a project and I've seen a person and said, thank you so much for giving. And they said, oh, you know I gave? And I said, of course. And she's like, oh, thank you so much. Because people want that personal touch. They want to know that you care. The board needs to be engaged in this process of not only asking, but thanking people. Untrained and unwilling volunteers. That means we don't have anybody helping us and we're doing it on our own. It's very likely we're going to fail. This is a key. I have worked with so many organizations where the CEO, executive director do not know how to raise money. And instead of saying, I don't know how to raise money, they just don't raise money. They're afraid. What are you afraid of? Let's talk about that. Let's work through that. They have to be involved. I had one organization I worked with, and they went through 3 development directors, and I said, you are not allowed to hire anybody until you solicit 10 people yourself so you understand what it is you're asking that person to do. If I'm a CEO and I don't know what I'm asking you to do, I can't help you be successful. I'm setting you up to fail. So the last piece of this is the reason for the annual campaign. It's establishing the habit of giving. I give every year to the same organizations. I give to certain events, I give to certain things, every year because I have gotten in the habit of giving. It's the basis for planned giving. Planned giving is so critical. I had a call tonight from one of my potential clients who probably won't be a client because she's getting a big bequest. That's the downside of being a consultant. I am very excited for your potential $2 million bequest. But now they don't have to do fundraising, and they're an organization that's struggling with that. But they were just informed that a person they knew had put a bequest in their will for $2 million had passed away. Planned giving, if you're building an endowment, if you are an organization that needs big money, planned giving is key. You have got to tell people they can leave you in their will. It is critical. When I worked at Holy Name Endowment, and I'm going to be done in a minute here, I was hired because I answered an ad in 1982 that said, local foundation needs director some clerical work. They were running a $500,000 campaign to build an endowment. And they were a Catholic school. I wasn't Catholic. I had never heard of fundraising, but I was nice. That was the criteria for hiring me. Well, one of the things they didn't realize was I was also smart enough to know that I needed to learn how to do fundraising. And that's where I got my experience in becoming the person that I am today, is because I worked for an organization when I went to the board and said, okay, our consultant is gone, we've raised $500,000, now what do we do? And they said, that's why we hired you. It was really funny because I had no idea what this whole thing was about, but I learned. And the first thing I learned was planned giving. And I left that school 5 years later, and 120 people had left the school in their will within the first 9 months of starting that program. I had $167,000. 2 people had died and left bequests. I have no idea if other people have passed away who had done that, but that school is still there, and I know some of that must be due to the fact that some of the people who committed to doing that probably left a bequest. And I emphasize that with people very strongly, that the key to success of fundraising is planned giving. You don't have to be a planned giving expert. You have to look for opportunities and provide a way for people to leave bequests to your organization. And the annual fund is where you start. You want people to understand why you're successful, what you've accomplished. You want to renew donor commitments every year. You want to develop new donors for your database. So if you run a capital campaign, you have a pool of resources, because where you start is going to be with those donors who are in your annual fund campaign. The next piece of this is stewardship. How do we steward people? How do we make them feel good about giving? And Heather is going to address that with us.
Like Carole said, I'm excited to introduce Heather. She's the development director here at Peter White Public Library, the largest public library in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. She's charged with raising approximately 10% of the operating budget per year. This year, the library has gathered over $200,000 for general operations and the Peter White Public Library Foundation, with the majority of gifts coming from individuals. Heather has a Bachelor of Science degree in Public Relations from Northern Michigan University and holds a certificate in fundraising management from the Lilly School of Philanthropy at Indiana University. Welcome, Heather.
Welcome to the library. So happy to see everybody here. Like I said, I'm Heather Steltenpohl, and I am the development director here at the library. And a majority of my time is spent on our annual fund and balancing our budget, which is more challenging every year, as I'm sure everybody knows. This money is right to our general operating budget. Some gifts are designated, but of course general gifts are, obviously the best gifts. But we do get gifts designated for specific collections, for specific programs, and those too will fall into the annual fund. In 2006, we really started an annual fund in earnest. We raised $12,000 that year. And so this past year we raised about close to $220,000 total. And that wasn't just because we started asking more. That was because of stewardship and keeping in touch with people and exchanging information. And that's really why I want to speak with you about that tonight. I really find it is more beneficial for me to take care of my donors that I have right now than to run around looking for new donors. I do believe the rate of retention is about 70% right now of keeping a donor. If I'm lucky, if I go out and actively solicit new donors, you get about 3 to 5% back. New donors will happen naturally if we take care of the donors we have, and that is my philosophy on fundraising. If I want to create that sustainable income, I retain my donors, and that's what it's all about. So, in stewardship is in relationship-based fundraising. Stewardship focuses on nurturing the donor's relationship with the organization. You want to create and maintain a mutually beneficial relationship between the organization and the donor. People support the library because they care about something about the library. I want to make sure that their gift goes toward what is most important to them at the library. And you as a board member are very instrumental in all levels of stewardship, so we'll get into that. Obviously, we've talked already about acknowledging gifts in a timely, personal, and appropriate manner, the receipt letter being the very minimum. We also do thank you cards for board members, and this is funny, we'll have the board members just handwrite a thank you card. I will have people come back in with that thank you card with a check, with another gift, because it's really that powerful, it was that personal. And I do try and pair up board members with people that they know so they can really personally thank them. But it really doesn't matter, you know, just coming from a trustee. We have our newsletter list that people can opt out of course. But people do like to be included in that, and memorials and tributes are included in those as well. Phone calls from board members, phone calls from the director, discussing the gift. That's very important. Again, you're getting that feedback and finding out, is this the best use for the gift? Next time, is there a better way to use their money that is most beneficial to them as well? You may announce a gift at a board meeting. If it's for a very special project, you may have the donor come to the meeting and speak with the board. You have your year-end receipts. Don't just send a form. Send a nice, personalized letter with it. Again, another opportunity to say thank you. Don't give it up. Say thank you. Send them a little update on, guess what just happened here? We started this new program and 500 kids showed up and we only thought 12 were coming. You know, that's happened. So people love to hear those little stories. Your annual report, again, don't forget to say thank you in your annual report. It's not just financial information, statistics, and lists. It's an opportunity to say thank you. Donor recognition displays. Over here we have a little wall of everybody who gave money for the piano over here. We have a wall of honor for our capital campaign upstairs. There's name spaces throughout the library. Those are different opportunities to, again, thank donors. And again, it kind of advertises too that, oh, you can give to the library. You know, for whatever reason, if you're new to town, some people don't know that we actually fundraise, which I'm trying to, you know, change that, but it happens. But it's just a way to show that you can designate gifts too. Some gifts will require, with the donor's approval, a media release or publicity materials, such as a gift to an endowment fund or a special project. It could leverage other gifts. Challenges, you definitely want to publicize challenges. People love challenges, so you really want to make the most with the media with that. Make sure you're present and available and that people are able to speak with you. Communicate without solicitation. I have it in my mind that I will try and communicate with the donor 5 times for every 1 time that we solicit. So say thank you at least 5 times for every please. And I know that sounds very like a formula, but you kind of have to have standards for yourself to make sure you're actually doing this. And it's not hard. and it's actually enjoyable if you're doing it right. So just make sure that you're keeping in touch more than you're asking for money. Greeting cards are very powerful. Holiday cards, Thanksgiving cards, birthday cards. If you're able to collect birthdays and send birthday cards, do it. Anniversary cards. If you see somebody in the news for a great accomplishment, send them a little card. Say, congratulations, you're friends with the library love. They're so happy for you. Very powerful. Insider letters. If you have a bit of good news or bad news, a letter to your donors explaining the situation is very powerful. Get those people the information first. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Involve them in opportunities. Donors are great volunteers, if they weren't volunteering already. They can help you with special events. Here at the library, we have this wealth of information in our community, and people will come and present programs, and quite often we'll find that when dealing with donors that, oh, this person is an expert on this, and this would be a great program that the community would love, and we'll have them come and do a lecture, or maybe they're a musician or whatever, but then the whole community can enjoy their talent, and usually these people are excited to share their talent. Request feedback and advice from these people. Again, they're very talented. Most people are happy to sit down with you and discuss a problem or an opportunity that you have at your organization and offer a little advice. I don't recommend going to a lawyer and expecting free legal advice. That's not what I'm talking about, unless you've worked out something for a pro bono gift from the lawyer. But if they have an area of expertise that you think that they would be willing to share with your organization, I would suggest talking with them. And these people also make great committee members for your organization. If you have a building committee, if you have a finance committee, look at your donor pool, and those people are great people to include on those committees. Again, have an open door policy, make yourself available. So, stop in any time, say hi, make sure that they know if there's something. I've had people come to me about a problem with their library card. I'm the development director. All I know how to do is check out a book on my own card. I really don't go too far into it. But I can get them in touch with the person who can help them. And that's what's important. Be a jack of all trades for your organization. Provide the donors with information about the gift's impact. And the bottom line with this is making sure they understand how their gift changed lives. Because with all of these nonprofits, you're changing somebody's life somehow, one way or another. How did their gift change somebody's life? What did it do differently? One thing we do here at the library is a donor and volunteer appreciation night. It's an invitation only for our donors and volunteers. We do it once a year. And there's no ticket, there's no cost, there's no program. You just come and have hors d'oeuvres, and about 500 people show up every year, and it's a great time. But it's just a way to speak with people and say, oh, did you see this over here? And we have donors who, I'm not quite sure that they're actually patrons, but they appreciate the quality of life that the library provides to our community. So, but they'll show up for Donor and Volunteer Appreciation Night once a year because it's a great time. And so it's a great way to just show them, here, come look at this, or this is our new book collection on this topic, I know you like this, or just another face-to-face opportunity. Again, open houses too. If you have a new collection or whatever that you're featuring, have an open house, invite your donors, again, one-on-one time. You might arrange for a private tour or a meeting with this donor if they funded something very specific so that they can come in and talk one-on-one with the director or with the appropriate staff member about what their gift was designated for. Here at the library, I provide lists of items purchased for people who support specific collections. For instance, I have a donor who gives $1,000 a year for adult fiction, which is a very broad collection gift. So what I do is when they order the books, I send her the list, and if she has any that she wants to put on hold right away, we make that happen too. When people give us $25 for this book, very specifically, they will get the first hold on that book too. So it's just little ways that you can help them out with that book, or with their gift. And of course, collecting those quotes and anecdotes from program participants are and sharing those with your donors. It's so powerful. That, again, is showing how did the gift change somebody's life. This is somebody whose life was changed. It wouldn't have happened without your support. I always pull out this story, but it's such a great story because it's so powerful. We have a reading program here at the library that the Community Foundation generously supports, as well as many service clubs. And it's teaching families how to read to children, because some people need help learning how to read to young people. And one of the evaluation forms, the person put, "I never thought to read to my child." That's powerful, and now we do it every day. Now we read. I mean, that's just, it's amazing. That's changing lives. That now you're also building that relationship between the caregiver and the child. This should go unsaid, but it is a problem sometimes. Use the gift as directed. You should always keep accurate, up-to-date donor records. You should have a donor database, preferably with donor-centered software. There are many different products. You can spend as much money as you want on these products too. But we have a reasonable one here at the library called Donor Perfect, and I'm sure you can talk with Jim about what they use too. But you have got to invest in the appropriate software to manage your donors. Also, inform the appropriate staff of the nature of the gift. Like I said, we receive specific gifts for specific collections. I then talk with the librarian who deals with that collection, so she knows that this is what this money is for. That's what the money goes toward, is buying those books and nothing else. That's what the money's for. And I do not borrow from one fund to pay another one. Not only is that not ethical, I don't think it's legal. So, and on that same note, don't accept a designated gift that you can't fulfill the designation. Now, I know people love animals, but we're not going to take a gift here to house homeless cats here at the library. It just doesn't fulfill our mission. I don't care if they come to me with, we have $1 million right now. It's not the library's job. I would recommend they talk to UPAS because that's their job. So, but I mean, that's kind of an extreme thing. But I mean, we do get weird things like that where you got, I don't really know if that's what the mission of the library is meant for. And maybe there's a better way that you could take your money and make a bigger impact in our community, because that's what it's all about in the end, is getting the money in the right place for the community. Do not accept any donation that doesn't advance the mission of your organization. That's what it always comes back to, is what is your organization's mission? That's what you're raising the money for. We don't house homeless cats, I hope. We're not doing it intentionally. Keep private information private. We talked a little bit about that earlier. Donors will, or your board members will probably know donor names. They might know the amounts depending on what's going on. But that information is not for anybody else to know. That is very private. If a gift is anonymous, I will tell, if I have to discuss it with the board, I'll make sure the board members understand this is an anonymous gift. This is not for anybody else's ears. I have some people who are super anonymous and nobody can know except for me. I mean, that's fine. But understand that you have to protect that. It's very important. If somebody wants to be anonymous, they mean it. Most people don't, but there are people who do, and it's very important you protect that. I don't even really discuss dollar amounts with the general staff here at the library unless I'm dealing with somebody with a designated fund. For that same reason, it's private information. There's really no reason that a page here at the library needs to know how much this donor gave. But they'll know that they are a donor. I'm more of the type of the annual fund where I don't look at how much people give to the annual fund. It's more about, are they still giving? And if they're not, why not? So I can tell you how far back somebody's gave. I can, in my head, I can go, oh, I think that person's given for about 10 years now, or this is their first gift. But I probably can't tell you offhand how much they gave for the past 10 years, because it's more important to me that, oh look, this person's given 10 years in a row. That's sustainability in fundraising. We can move on to the next one there. Keep your donors abreast of your issues. Remember to treat your donors as family members. They're not friends, they're not acquaintances. They're giving you money. They consider you to be family, a member of their family, and that's how you should think of them when you're thinking about your relationship and the information you share with them. Make sure your donors have accurate, up-to-date information. Insider letters are a good way to do it. If you're having something very specific that you need to make phone calls about, you might want to do that. Donors should know the truth, both good and bad. And in a crisis situation, your donors will be your lifeline to the community. Give them the accurate information as soon as possible. They will speak on your behalf to correct those rumors that get out into the community. You have your donors who go and have coffee with the same group every morning, and you know those people have watched the news last night or read the paper or watched the news this morning, and they're going to discuss what was in the news. Now, wouldn't you like to have somebody as your spokesperson with the right information in that circle? So that's why you want to get your people the right information so they'll be your voice. Donors who care about you will be your voice. And again, telling them the truth, don't sugarcoat it. They can handle the good news, they can handle the bad. They'd rather handle the bad news if it's the truth, I think. They are intelligent, and donors are savvy about the nonprofit world and how things work. So again, just making things seem like it's okay, it's probably not going to fly. And again, put the mission of the organization above all ego, above the staff ego, above your own ego. I know it can be scary, but when it comes down to the mission, if you're advancing the mission, that's what it's all about. And the same goes for times of celebration. When your organization has a momentous occasion, give it to the donors. It's their victory. Without their support, this occasion would not happen. Make them feel ownership of that. When we won the Medal of Honor, we had a breakfast here to unveil, to make the announcement a few years back, and it was a lot of our donors and supporters who were invited to that. And it really was, it was just, we have the library staff and we have our programs, but without our donors and our volunteers, those things that you celebrate, they won't happen. Right now, if we didn't have our donors, the doors would probably be locking pretty soon. We probably wouldn't be open past 7. So it's really that simple. So celebrate the good times and handle the bad ones as clearly and the best you can. Do not miss an opportunity to say thank you. Even when you're saying please, say thank you several times. Thank them for their support, acknowledge their previous support. Don't treat a recurring donor like they're new. It's a different relationship that you have there. Just last week, we received a $50,000 annual fund gift, and this was from somebody who about 10 years ago gave us $300 a year. And it took that long of getting to know this person and them learning to value the library, learning to feel comfortable with giving us that amount of money once a year, and that's important. And understanding that too as a board member, this could be a slow-moving wagon if you're going to do this right and have sustainable income. But it's not bad. It's actually kind of a good time if you're doing it right. You're getting to know these people who are very interesting and valuable people in your community. So if you're doing it right, you will have success. Just keeping in touch and really keeping it simple. And again, thinking of your donors as your family members of your organization and treating them as such. So I think that is where I'm going to wrap up, so we have time for some questions.
All right, so if you had pressing questions that you wrote down on your card, if you'll pass them all to the middle and Chad will grab them, or you can lift them up in the air. And our presenters, do you guys want to come over here so you can speak into the microphone? Would that work? Awesome. write it down and you have one, you can raise your hand now while Chad's collecting them.
I can speak to that a little bit because we do have a larger staff at the library. We're in a situation where, being in a small town, we have people who are friends with board members. And you do have to, I think if you handle the board member properly at the beginning and make them understand that just because so-and-so is your friend doesn't mean you can share all of this information with them. And really, you have to have them understand the boundaries. And again, if they understand that they're not the director, that there is a director, and if that problems that the staff member is having shouldn't come over the director, that there's still a chain of command, and understanding that. Does that?
I'll think about it in a different light.
Okay.
Is it helpful for staff members to understand a little bit more about the board's role and why they're involved in the organization?
Yeah, yes, definitely, definitely. And it's an ongoing process too, just like board members, of educating staff of why we fundraise. That, you know, rather than start the budget off $200,000 left, we actually have that built in, and if we don't do this, we're going to cut the budget. So, and how we do that too. And it's funny because we have our maintenance man here, you know, he'll introduce me to somebody. This is Heather, and she's always begging for money. Actually, that's not what I do. I'm going to be in trouble if we're begging, but as I said, actually, you know, it's a little more gentle than that. And, you know, helping them understand exactly what I'm doing. So, which is a lot sometimes.
I can add one thing to this that kind of addresses that. When Heather was talking about family and donors being your family, my experience over the years with board directors is when you have a family, there are some kids who need a lot of attention and you need to spend a lot of time with them. There are other board directors who clearly understand their role and you don't need to do that type of thing. And then there's other ones who kind of are like off in the distance, who do their thing, they come to the board meetings, they support your annual campaign, they say good things, but they don't need like that coddling and that type of thing. So my advice to that is, when you know your board members and you develop a relationship with them, there will be a two-way street. They'll know how to approach you, you'll know how to approach them, and you have to treat each one differently. And each one has different needs and different, in whatever the setting may be.
I think there's also different organizations that have rules. A few years ago, there were boards that you were not allowed as staff to talk to board members. Everything had to go through the executive. I can't remember the name of it, but it was a whole program where the executive director was the liaison with the board, and the interaction between staff and board was minimal. What we try to teach people is that board members need to be accessible in the sense that they need to know who staff are, they need to know what they do. Staff should be invited on occasion to come to board meetings to present the information on the programs that they have. And staff should be comfortable being able to talk to board members. If they run into them, they should be able to talk to them about things that they're concerned with. I think we have a lot of organizations who have a real fear of staff talking to board members and only letting the executive director, and I've seen that work in very negative ways when you never, as a staff person, have access to the board of directors. You're never able to even know who they are. And I think that morale in organizations like that is very low. And so there has to be a way that the executive director paves the way for some interaction, if it's board staff retreats, different ways that the board and staff can get to know each other, because it's very critical when you're working together to try to accomplish something, to feel like you have a relationship. And I think a lot of that changed a few years ago when it became very much the trend that you did not ever speak to a board member if you were staff. So hopefully that's changing.
I've got a question from one of the cards. And it says, for an organization or nonprofit that currently does little to no stewardship, where is the best place to realistically start?
Thank you cards. And when you get these board members too, who, you know, oh, I'm not gonna ask for money, but you know, this is still a good person who's obviously passionate about their cause. Have them start by thanking people. Most people are comfortable writing a thank you card. They might not be ready to pick up the phone and say thank you for the gift yet, but that will happen. And thanking donors is just as important as asking for the money in the first place, if not more so, as far as I'm concerned. So that's how I would start there. Look at your newsletter and look at the content of your newsletter and make sure that you're including donor-centered content in your newsletter. And what I mean by that is do an article about a program or a service that is happening because of a gift or a grant or some way that you had to raise money in order for this program or service to happen. And that's very effective too. And again, it's a way to thank the donor, it's a way to thank the organization that's also supporting your organization. But that's how I would get started. But thank you cards are a great way to get people, brand new fundraisers in the door of big picture fundraising.
I had an organization one time that did something that was really important. What they did was a person solicited me for money and asked for $250. I thought about it. I had been out of town. I came back and I said, oh, should we do this? And we agreed we'd donate the $250. It was only $250 was the way we thought about it. I sent that in. I received a thank you letter from the official, thank you. I received a thank you card from the person who had actually asked me for the gift. So that's the key that's important, is that the organization communicated with the person who gave and said, yes, she gave $250. And what she did was, she did one thing, and this is what I learned in Catholic school fundraising, do one thing they don't expect. She included a picture, and this was when Governor Granholm had run for office, and I had gone to her inaugural, and she had taken a picture of me with the governor, and she said, oh, I thought you might like this picture of you and the gov. So she did one thing that I didn't expect. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a board member who said, I'm new on the board, you don't know who I am, but I just wanted to introduce myself to you and thank you very much for that gift of $250. I never forgot that organization. So that's part of what you do is, what is it, one thing that they don't expect? And if you do that, they can always remember you.
And I can add just one quick thing to this. Reintroduce yourself to a phone. Okay, and I actually presented on this at a nonprofit conference a couple of years ago. But the value of calling a donor and thanking a donor, we don't do enough of that. And what I did for a long, long time is I actually built into my schedule a designated time. I picked a day where I had an hour of call time. And before I could do that, I practiced. I just practiced. Thank you for your gift, so on and so forth. I'll never forget there was one particular donor who gave she was on the West End, and it was a $25 gift for a project that we had launched and that we had done it. And I called this donor to thank her. And she was like flabbergasted that I called her over a $25 gift. And she said, I can't believe you're calling me for this. I said, all gifts matter. You matter, and what you did, it was helping with this. We just want to appreciate you. About a month later, we got a check for $1,000 from that same donor. Pick up the phone, call people.
Got another question on the card, and it's kind of got a couple parts. What does an organizational culture of philanthropy look like, and how do you know if you are achieving and or maintaining that culture?
They all wear red blazers.
They're generally
I don't have a red blazer.
I think a culture of philanthropy, one thing that I can say is they're healthy financially, fiscally sound, and people know that they're doing just fine. And they don't have to, they're actually, I guess that's what it is, a philanthropic culture that's healthy is financially a culture that's healthy. And so organizationally, that is what tells you that that organization is philanthropic.
And I would add that you know when a organization is healthy and you have a culture of philanthropy, when you can walk into the room and you know exactly that everyone knows where their role is and what seat they have on the bus. And what I mean by that is you know that you have a board director or the president of the board who's in command of the meeting, who understands what's going on, and everyone knows their roles and responsibilities in a very respectful kind of way. And that's important because sometimes some tough decisions are made at board meetings and there's some things that happen, but when you have that right culture, you learn from that and you move and you become a better organization.
All right, we've got Dr. Arnold.
Yeah, that just brought up something. A couple of times in my life I've been, you're talking about being fiscally healthy. A couple of times in my life I've gotten involved in organizations at times when they were not fiscally healthy. In that turnaround effort, you know, what do you do about desperation fundraising? On the one hand, sometimes you can go to people and go, we're not going to be here next year if you don't give. On the other hand, people don't like to see their money go down the drain with a sinking ship. What's your thought about that, about the approach under those circumstances?
That's a good one. That's a really good one.
Well, we often say that desperation fundraising is often the beginning of an annual fund campaign. I'm desperate, give me money, I don't care what you do. I think that desperation fundraising has to have a solution. I think I need to be able to say to someone, here's what happened. Here's what we're going to do about what happened. And if we do this, this is what will occur. In order for us to have a chance to turn this ship around, we need people like you who believe in us, who believe in our mission, and trust that we have the right people on board who are working very hard to turn this corner on the situation. Can I guarantee that that's going to happen? No. But without your support, it definitely won't happen. But I have to be able to honestly tell people, here's what happened, here's what I'm doing about it, here's what our organization will look like if we're successful. And we have these people, and name them, who we believe are willing to help not only invest their time but their money in order to turn that ship around. And I need you on board in order to do that. Now, that person may not give you the money at the level that you want. They may not really give you the money up front, but they might be willing to pledge their support down the road if they see some progress being made with the organization. It's a very difficult place to be in. It's a very difficult challenge. But there are several organizations in our community that have actually met that challenge, and they have turned organizations around when they've been on the brink of disaster. So I believe it's being honest, telling people what you think you can do to make a difference, and if you do this, this is how you will survive.
Just quickly to add to that, when we're here at the library, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the dark store loophole. I'm not going to talk about that. Pretty down on it, to be lying. I won't get into that. But I can't tell you how many times I said to myself, I am so grateful we started our annual fund back in 2006. Because when times got tough, when we were paying back tens of thousands of dollars in these refunds, we still had our donors, and not only that, our donors stepped up to the plate, and if they could, they gave a little bit more, or they gave more often. We had some people who only gave once a year, now they're giving twice a year. And that wouldn't have happened if all of a sudden the dark store event happened and then we decided to start an annual fund. Things would have been much more bleak here at the library. I don't even really want to think about it, but I can't tell you how many times I thought, oh my gosh, thank God we started the annual fund back when we did. And so I think that's the key takeaway. Start the annual fund before you need it. You know,
Start it now.
yes, and when she was talking about this bequest of $2 million, now they're all set, I was like, what organization's all set? I think, you know, build your fund balance, you know, get yourself in a sustainable situation, so when you do have a rainy day, you're in a better situation.
I also think with the library, people love the library.
Thank you.
And so it wasn't a matter of desperation for the library as much as people saying, we already believe trust in this organization and we want to make this work and we're going to step up to the plate and help. That's a little different than when you're really underwater and you're in a desperate situation when people aren't sure they even like you anymore.
And if I could just add one thing, it's part and parcel of this, it's a little bit off of the direct question, but invest in education for your employees. Shelby and I went to lunch today and we had a good portion of the discussion talking about this. It's one of the things that I see as I travel across the Upper Peninsula and I meet with nonprofit leaders and boards, the types of things that we were talking about before. If you don't invest in education and your people are not trained in annual giving, if they're not trained in board development, if they're not trained in major gifts, you're shortchanging your organization. So what I tell organizations all the time is, I know you may not be the decision maker, but you need to talk to the board, chair, or your boss about the importance of building educational dollars into your annual budget to train your folks.
Any more cards or people with burning questions? No? Yeah, the presenters agreed to stick around and meet with people one-on-one if they have specific questions they may not want to ask the group. So thank you all for attending. This was really fun, and we kind of talked about doing it annually. I don't know if that's still something that... Yeah. Look right at Carole. But yeah, this was really fun, and I'm so glad we had all of these great presenters and such a great turnout. So thank you everyone for coming.